Okay, there we go. So we're going to talk about verbs today. And if I can just get somebody to mute again.
Really good, surprisingly. I definitely don't give up.
Lovely, thank you so much. Cool, all right. Right, verbs. My notes. I have notes today, as I said before. I don't usually, but I do now. So we're going to talk about verbs and what they actually mean. The word verb comes from Latin, and the actual word is verbatim. And we usually hear that word in English sometimes, say, oh, you copied something verbatim, or you quote it. Means that you've reproduced something word for word. And we've got a few more words that are in the same family. We have the word verbose. So if somebody is verbose, means that they're quite wordy, they use a lot of words, or a piece of writing is verbose, a lot of words and not so much meaning. We have the word verbicide, which is what happens with dictionaries when words go out of use. They might be killed from the dictionaries. That's verbicide. We have verbiage, which means an abundance of words, and we have the word verbal, of course, which means oral or orally. So that's the etymology of the word verb. So in this instance, the word verb means it's to do with action. So that's what we're going to cover today. I've decided to do 2 sessions on this because it is quite complex. So we'll start with 3 kinds of verbs. Shall I start? There. I'll have my little, we have transitive verbs. And by contrast, we have intransitive verbs. And the last kind, we have linking verbs. Okay. So those are sort of the categories in which they fall. A transitive verb, it's an action that, how do I explain this? It transferred the action to something else. So for example, if I say, I drink water, the verb drink transfers the action to the water. And if I say just I drink, it can be interpreted in different ways. And no, I don't drink generally. But it takes the action and it transfers. There's a recipient, or there's something that receives the action, and that's called transitive. And that word trans really goes, it means to transfer across, to bring across. So if we look at just this part here, it means to bring across. Okay. Intransitive means the action or the verb can sort of live on its own. It doesn't need something else to complete its meaning, or it doesn't usually transfer it to something else. So a word like I play, I can stand with, it doesn't need something to make it do its action. However, it can be used in a transitive way, where I could say, I play chess, in which case it can be sort of a transitive because it takes the playing and transfers it to the chess. So this can sort of work both ways. And it really does depend on the meaning and your interpretation of it. So there's no right and wrong. There are very few words that are strictly into the transitive or intransitive categories, but generally speaking, if you can draw out a different meaning, or you can justify why you think it's transitive or intransitive, any one of those are right. So just to let you know that what I say and what I say here, it's not the absolute truth, and there are plenty experts there that know more than me. And certainly you can find out, and there are a lot of YouTube videos about any of these. So you can take what I say and you can be inspired and use, but it's not an absolute truth. So you can sort of take what you need from this. Yeah. Linking verbs are, they don't hold meaning on their own. They actually need something else. And the word is one of those, because the division, sorry. All right, Charlene, yes. Sorry, I'll just, so the verb is, we need something else. So we can't say the weather is. It doesn't, it absolutely needs something else. So it links the weather to its description. So, and there are lots of words or lots of verbs in this category. So if we look at the word to be, or the verb to be, am, are, is, then the past was, were. So there are lots in this category that they just act as a linking verb between usually a subject, so sort of a noun type word, and something else, usually an adjective, could be another noun. So it links, that's its function. All right. So any questions about this? 3 categories of verbs or kinds. Right. So now we're going to talk about the actual thing, the verbs. Verbs come in 5 forms. There are 5 forms. Okay, the first one is its base form. So if we take the word play, let's take play. So if we take the word play, for example, that is the base word. There's someone else. I'll just, there we go. And from there, we can build the other 4 forms. So that's the base. And now we can build the other 4 forms. Its present tense, its present form is, of course, play. I play, you play, and so on. Then there is its past form. So that's its present form. Its past form is in the past. So that would be played. Okay. The third form of this other form, it's the past participle, which is playing. Past participle, not played. This is present participle, and the past is again played. Okay, so I'll write that for you. It's present, past. This is called present participle. And past participle. And these guys are used to make up the tenses. So if we talk about present tense, past tense, progressive tenses, or continuous tenses, all these guys, they help form those tenses. So this is for a regular word or regular verb, but we have irregular verb, in which case these will be a little bit different. But before we go there, I want to talk about morphology. And that's going to be quite cool. So we have in morphology, or when we talk about morphology, we have 2 categories of words. We have something that's called an inflectional affix, or something that changes, and a derivational affix. So this is affix is a word that describes when we add things at the beginning or the end of words, and we have 2 kinds. We have the prefix, so we attach it at the beginning, and we have the suffix, which is attached at the end. So And those do two things to words. They're inflectional. Okay, and I'm going to focus on just on this little, this means flexible. So it changes the meaning, and derivational doesn't. So if we add something that kind of it's the same, but the form changes. So it's the meaning stays the same. So I'm going to write meaning stays the same. So what do I mean by this? Because this is a lot. For example, if I take the word pen and I want to tell the listener that I have more than one, I will say pens. That's a derivational meaning or a derivational suffix, the estes on the end of pens, that makes it plural. Because what it doesn't change the meaning of the word or the part of speech that it belongs to, the category of parts of speech. It just changes its shape. So it's still a noun, it's still pens, it's still, we just want to know that there's more than one. So that's a derivational affix or suffix. Inflectional suffix would be, for example, if I take the word bake and I add er on the end and it becomes baker. In that case, I have changed the word bake, which is a verb, into baker, which is now the person doing the action. So it's a noun in this case. So I've just changed us. That's an inflectional suffix. So I'd say would be one. And in here, just the s would be under there. Now, this er, we talked about adjectives last week. This can be added onto adjective to say, to turn the word small into smaller. And in this case, it's a derivational. In that case, it's derivational because the idea of small, it doesn't change. The adjective doesn't change to something else. It still stays an adjective. There's just an added little bit of meaning that just refine that meaning of the adjective. I hope that makes sense. Right, so when it comes to verbs, we have a couple of things that we add on to our verbs. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to show it this way. I'm going to write, this is our verb, and then I'm going to put stuff before and after. So for verbs, we have a few suffixes. We have this suffix here, or sometimes this one. And we put that on the end of verbs when we conjugate a verb. Conjugation means that we're taking it through all the pronouns. So for example, if I were to conjugate the verb to be, I would say I am, you are, she, he, it is, we are, you are, they are. So just taking it through all the personal pronouns. And this one here, is added to third person singular. So we say runs, plays, jumps, and it's usually he, she, or it that does that. So we add that to verbs, and it's a derivational thing. So it doesn't actually change the part of speech. It still stays a verb. The second kind of suffix that we add to change the meaning is this one here, which is ed. And ed has three pronunciation. It can be pronounced as ed, or as in landed. So ed, landed. It can have a t sound, as in the word wink, winked, and a d sound, which is in the word play, played. That's a d sound. So, and I make sure that I teach children all of the sounds that this particular suffix makes. It makes three sounds. And if I were to ask them to spell the sound t, for example, I would expect them to give me the word, give me the letter t, and the spelling ed as well, if they've been taught, of course, I wouldn't expect them to give it to me any other way. So when we do dictation, and I say, can you spell the sound T? They would give me T or ED. Right. I'm just wondering, are there any questions so far? Okay. All right. Another common verb suffix or suffix that goes with verbs is this ing one. So playing, jumping. So that's that. And usually we have things that go before a verb, and they're not very many. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Things like en, as in enforce, entrap, and no, I was going to say engage. Re is another one, and re means again, replay, reread, redo. Un is another, undo, undo something. And I have another one, which is be, as in the word befriend. I befriended, I guess, a little old lady who lives down the street. I haven't, but it was just an example. So those are prefixes that can go with the verb. There are other ones as well, but not as many as for other words, other like nouns, for example, and some suffixes that go with verbs. Cool. All right. So now I'm going to go to and talk about regular and irregular verbs. Regular and irregular verbs. Irregular verbs.
Sorry, Elena.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
I've just been looking back over my notes and I just wanted to clarify something
Certainly.
with you just in my brain. So the example you gave us for the derivational affix, and it doesn't change the meaning and the meaning stays the same. So one of the examples you gave was a pen,
Yes.
which obviously is a noun, and then we add the s, which makes it a plural.
Certainly.
So if we were to use the one with the bake and we went bake and bakes, I can see that wouldn't, you're talking about within, I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries.
I'm just trying to, like, I can see what to me, my understanding of morphology was that the s, the suffix that goes on to, obviously once it goes on to a noun, it becomes a plural. So yes. Therefore it does change the meaning slightly in the sense that it goes from singular to plural, but not obviously of the item. Is that correct?
Yes. So with the derivational, I guess, suffixes, affixes, it doesn't change the part of speech.
Yes. Okay.
It can change, it slightly alters the meaning. So you go from singular to plural, or you go from a comparative, sort of an adjective. So if I gave the example of small, and if we say smaller, it doesn't, the adjective is still an adjective. It hasn't changed to a different part of speech.
Okay.
So for example, that ER, the ER on the, it can be both. It can be inflectional because it can take bake, turn it into baker. So we go from a verb to a noun. But in a smaller, it's a derivational affix because it doesn't change a part of speech.
Gotcha. So it's basically, it's looking at the base and how it's changed or not changed, or the degree of change. I've got you now. That's cool. I just needed to clarify that in my head. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So the way I think about it is in inflection, it has to be with, it's got the little, it's FLE, which to me sort of sounds a little like flexible. So it's taking it from one category into another. Derivational is just to derive something from something else, which still stays the same. It's still the same thing, but you were deriving more words from there.
Yeah. So it's the basis of saying. Moving on. Cool. Thank you so much.
No worries. My pleasure. All right. So next is going to be regular and irregular verbs. And as a learner of English, as a young child, I was first taught English in my home country, in Romania. And there were a few things that we learned, and we learned a lot by rote. And one of the first things that we ever learned were the forms of the verbs, particularly irregular verbs. What do I mean by that? So if we go back to the forms of the verbs, we have a base, we have a past form, and we have a participle, a past participle form. So if we take the verb, for example, so I'll take a regular one first. Can't think of it now. Jump. Its base form is jump. Its past form is jumped. And the participle form is again jumped. It's jumped. What is that participle form? It's the third form, and it helps create or put together the progressive tenses. So for example, if I said, I have jumped, in that case is the participle that we use. And that will become a little bit more clear if we look at irregular verbs, when we look at them. So let's do that too. So an irregular verb will not have the same, we don't just add ed. We might in some cases, but generally speaking, we don't. So let's take the word drive, for example. If I drive now, that's the base. I drove yesterday, so that's a past. But if I were to say I have driven, I can't say I have drove. I can't say I have drive. I have driven. Driven is the past participle. And we use the perfect tenses, not the continuous, sorry, not the progressive. So we use them to form the perfect tenses. And they differ. There are some words that we can put them into families of how this changes, but generally speaking, the words that we use every day, the verbs that we use every day that come from Old English, or that sort of Anglo-Saxon sort of old English, they are the ones that are most irregular. The newer verbs that we have either borrowed from someone, or they've been around for a little bit longer, usually the ones that have come or have been added after the not the Roman conquest, the French conquest of 1066. Those tend to be a little bit more regular. They are regular. They're the ones where we just add ed on the end. So you'll find everyday words are the most irregular, and those are the ones that you hear children go, for example, write, and they say, I written, or I have wrote, or where they're not quite sure of how to use those and what the correct forms are. So that's that explanation. So if I were to take the word base, the past form, and the past participle, for a normal word, a regular word, we have the word play, played, and this one, I have played. Then we have the word drive, and in the past tense is drove and driven. Another one would be sing. I sing right now. I sang yesterday, and I have sung a song. So it goes sing, sang, sung. Grew is not one that I like. It's one of my favorites. So it's the word grow. Grew and grown. Sorry, my family has just walked through the door. Okay. And then we have some funky ones that have no change. So the word cut doesn't actually change at all. And same for the word hurt. Okay. So what do we use these for? Well, base is obviously present tense. and it's what we use to form all the other forms of the verb. Past we use when we form the past tense, and the past participle when we form perfect tenses that use the word have. So I have played, I have driven, I have sung, I have grown, I've cut. I have been hurt. That's a different one though. I have been hurt. It's not quite perfect. Right. The past participles too can play the role of an adjective. So if we use it to describe a noun, then it can be, it's a verb form that plays the role of an adjective. So if I said, this is the game, the played game, or the driven car, or the sung song, or a grown plant, or a cut flower, they are adjectives. So we can say that in this case, these guys can do two things. It can form perfect tense, and it can be an adjective. All right. This one. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about active and passive voice, because the past participle helps form the passive voice as well. So if I say the cat caught a mouse, that's active voice, because the thing that is doing the action, the catching, is the cat, and the cat is the subject. One second, we've got a question. Perfect refers to the tenses. So we have, and I'm just going to go to my little notes here. In English, we have a number of tenses. So what I mean by tenses, tense means time. We put action in different times. So the simple tense is present. So present tense, I play. Past simple, I played. Future simple, I will play. But then we've got tenses in between that. So if you look at my list here, we've got quite a few tenses in the English language. You can't really see that careful because there's very little. So we've got present progressive, we've got past progressive, present perfect. The perfect tenses are the ones that you use the verb has to form it. So for example, if I say he has spoken, that is a perfect tense because it uses has. And I guess next week when I plan to look at this topic of the tenses. That's why I said the verbs need a lot of work. This is a diagram that I use to sort of see where each of the tenses falls on a timeline. Because, for example, we know that present play is kind of like right now. And then let me just draw this quickly. We'll do it next week too. So we've got a timeline. This is me here. This is I play right now. This is I will play. That's the future. And the past is here. I played. But then we've got tenses that could be here, or they could be ones that start here and go over here. So there's a bit more to forming tenses, but they fall into three categories: simple, perfect tenses, and progressive. Yeah, progressive tenses or continuous. I hope that answers your question. I forgot where I was now. Sorry, my notes. All right, passive voice, active and passive voice. So the cat caught the mouse. It's the cat that's doing the catching, that's the subject of the sentence. If I said the mouse was caught by the cat, the mouse is not doing the catching. The mouse is receiving the action of the cat. So that's what we call passive voice, that it's not, the subject is not actively doing the action, it's receiving the action. So basically, if we look at sentence structure, we've got the object has just become the subject. So if we say the cat catches the mouse or caught the mouse is the object. It's the result of that action, or the action, the thing that the action influenced. But if we take it from the end of the sentence and pop it at the beginning, we call that passive voice, because the cat is at the end becomes kind of the object in that case, but it's the cat that's doing the action. I hope that makes sense. All right, so past participles also help passive voice, and sometimes they can act like a verb, but that's a bit complicated. The example I have here, she was lovingly taught, no, she wasn't. Lovingly taught grammar by her teacher. She is now a great author. So, and that's a little bit more, I don't want to spend time taking that apart because it's a bit more complicated, and I hope to touch on it next week. Right, so we've got regular and irregular verbs. We've got transitive and transitive verbs, and linking verbs. Then we have something, see what I've got here. Linking, auxiliary. Okay, I think I'm going to stop here because the rest of it has to do with tenses and how we form tenses. And I'd like to keep that for next week because it's kind of a big topic, and we don't have time to do that in 15 minutes. So, we can talk. So we talk about passive and active voice. We can talk about moods of the verbs. We've got 3 moods. Every verb has, or it can be placed into 3 moods. And that's exactly what it means. It gives sort of a mood to the sentence. We've got indicative mood, which is to indicate or to state. I play chess. That's an indicative mood. There's a subjunctive mood that usually has the word if. It's a conditional. So if I would say, if I were to go to school tomorrow, that's a subjunctive mood. An imperative mood is a command. So basically, if I said close the door, close, which is the verb in that sentence, would be in the imperative mood because it gives a command. So I think I've reached the end of what I wanted to do today. So I'm going to stop the recording so that you can pop in and ask questions, and I will do my very best to answer questions. Right.